A very good afternoon to all the esteemed speakers and our audience. I am Professor Rishikesh Krishna, your host for this session. I welcome you all to this session of the 32nd AIMS Annual Management Education Convention. The convention has been organized by Bhavan Center for Communication and Management, BCCM Bhubaneswar, in association with IIM Sambalpur. And in this plenary, our expert speakers will deliberate about the topic reorienting management education through pandemic and the new education policy. This pandemic has brought untold miseries and affected almost everyone. It has also brought about and will bring in future several permanent changes. Management institutes also need to rethink about reorienting management education to keep up with the changing needs of the students, the businesses, and society at large. How can this be done? To discuss on this topic, today we have with us very eminent guests. We have with us Professor Uday Salunke, who currently heads the Wellinkar Institute of Management Development and Research, V School, as its group director. His passion for leadership, design thinking, and innovation has helped V School carve itself a niche for itself in the space of management education. Dr. Uday Salunke has served as the president of Association of Indian Management School AIMS and also as chairman of the local managing committee Association of Management Development Institutions in South Asia. He is on the board of many national and international organizations and is the chairperson of Review Commission of the Gujarat National Law University and the chairman of Education Committee of the Council of European Union Chambers of Commerce in India. He is a recipient of the prestigious Eisenhower Fellowship, USA, and is also a recipient of the prestigious Ravi J. Mathai National Fellow Award conferred by the Association of Indian Management Schools for his exemplary contribution in the field of management education. Professor Salunke will be chairing this session. Welcome, sir. Next, we have his very distinguished guest, Sri Mohandas Pai. Shri Mohandas Pai has served in the areas of finance, accounting, information technology, human resources, education, corporate governance, policy formulation, and the venture and startup ecosystem. He is currently the chairman of Areen Capital, chairman of Manipal Global Education, member of boards of Havels India, member of the board of governors of National Investment and Infrastructure Fund, governing council, member of the Center for Advanced Financial Research and Learning of the Reserve Bank of India, chairman of the Regulatory and Financial Technology Committee of the Securities Board of Exchange, and chairman of SEBI's Primary Market Advisory Committee. Sri Mohandas Pai was previously a board member and the chief financial officer of Infosys for over a span of 17 years and has held board positions at Securities and Exchange Board of India and the National Stock Exchange of India, to name a few. He was also the chairman of FICCI Skills Committee, president of the All India Management Association, and the founder trustee of the Akshay Patra Foundation. He was awarded Padma Shri Award by the President of India in 2015 and the Karnataka Rajyotsava Award in 2008. Welcome, sir. Next, we have is a renowned scholar and internationally recognized thought leader, Professor Jagdish Seth, who is currently the Professor of Business in Viziata Business School at Emory University. Professor Seth has over 50 years of combined experience in teaching and research at University of Southern California, the University of Illinois, Columbia University, MIT, and Emory University. He has published more than 300 research papers and more than 30 books on various disciplines and topics. His insights on global competition, strategic thinking, geopolitics, and emerging markets are considered revolutionary. Dr. Seth has also been on board of several companies, including the Norstan PacWest Telecom, Cyrocell International, Shashun Drugs and Chemicals, and the Wipro Limited, and has also been advisor to several more. Professor Seth has been advisor to government of Singapore in repositioning the nation for the future. He has also been the policy advisor to the US government about the future of the telecommunications industry. Dr. Seth is a recipient of 2020 Padma Bhushan Award for Literature and Education. He is also a fellow of the Academy of International Business, fellow of Association of Consumer Research, and many others. He is the recipient of all 4 top awards given by the American Marketing Association. To quote marketing guru Philip Kotler, he is a scholar, change agent, advisor, and an entrepreneur. In other words, a Renaissance man. Welcome, sir. Next we have is Professor Rishikesh Krishna, who is currently director at the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. He was previously the director IIM Indore and mentor directors IIM Sambalpur, where he was also member board of governors. He is a member of board of governors, advisory boards, and academic councils of several of the leading institutes and has been on selection committees for vice chancellors. He has also been on several government committees on public policy and management and was chair Next Gen Human Resource Subcommittee, member Justice Sri Krishna Committee to evolve a data protection framework for India, member appointments board for whole-time directors of public financial institution, member appointment boards for CEOs, EDs of public sector banks, to name a few. He has served and serves on boards of several companies like Sundaram Asset Management Company Limited, Wheels India Limited, D-Link, and others. He has several publications to his credit and includes e-books, papers in referee journals, conference papers, articles, case studies, book chapters, and working papers. He has also served on editorial boards of several reputed journals. Professor Krishnan has received several awards and accolades like the Change Maestro and Institution Builder of the Year from Industry Academia Conference, Devang Mehta Award for Best Teacher in Strategic Management in 2010, and Thinker 50 Top 30 Management Thinkers in India in 2014. Welcome, sir. And lastly, we have Sri Narayan Ramaswamy, who is a veteran at KPMG and is currently the office managing partner for KPMG Kolkata and national lead for education and skill development sector. His current focus is on education, skill development, and social sector advisory. He has worked across sectors like information technology, financial services, logistics, energy, retail, and government. He has led multiple consulting engagements across India, SAARC, ASEAN, Middle East, and African regions. He is a member of several government and industry committees on education and skill development, such as a Standing Committee for National Council for Teacher Education, expert committees of MHRD on the new education policy, higher education, and technology in education. He is also in the board of Indian Institute of Health Management Research. Welcome, sir. Now I would request Dr. Salunke to chair this session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you for your kind introduction, Professor Abhishek Sinha. A very good afternoon, distinguished speakers from industry, government, and academia. AIMS President, Dr. Sujata Mangrajji, past presidents, regional vice presidents, executive board members, and AIMS Secretariat team, partners and well-wishers of AIMS, fellow directors, academicians, and my dear students. Our inaugural speakers have set the right tone on the conventional theme, rediscovering management education for the pandemic world. Road ahead. I must compliment President AIMS along with the executive board and past presidents who are like the lighthouse of AIMS to have come up with such an apt theme for its 32nd AIMS National Convention. My humble submission to today's learned audience comprising of directors, academic leaders, faculty members, industry, and most important of all, promoters of institution in the country to keenly listen to the proceedings of the convention as it will help in reorienting and creating our future. Welcome to the first plenary session of the AIMS convention titled Reorienting Management Education Through Pandemic and New Education Policy. If one were to look back, every industrial revolution, every crisis has brought about disruption, including the one we are experiencing, the pandemic, which has disrupted every facet of our work and life. While things have changed in the past, the pace of change has become exponential. Often, education was referred to being in the comfort zone. But when the pandemic struck, every organization, including educational institution, had to quickly adapt overnight, else face the dire consequences of shutdown. While initial phase of the pandemic involved in business continuity and adapting, it has evolved into much more as an opportunity to reorient and reinvent. While disruptions and uncertainties will continue, we certainly have learned to embrace ambiguity and the importance of being resilient. NEP 2020 vision is bold and future looking, which aims to transform the education system and in transforming India into a vibrant global hub for education. It puts learner at the core of the policy with a focus on holistic and multidisciplinary education. The sheer diversity in our HEI ecosystem and with more than 3,000 business schools in India requires a more granular approach to be taken into account with respect to implications of NEP on HEIs, including that on management education. Therefore, inclusion of management education and the implementation phase of NEP becomes important. Can we look at formulating a policy for encompassing all business schools, including standalone business schools? For example, policy could look at existing standalone PGDM business schools that meet a predefined criteria and give them a degree granting status and the choice to the institution if they wish to start or continue offering UG programs. As we are witness to, IIMs and standalone business schools have been successful in offering programs that cater to the ever-changing needs of the industry and society. Needless to say, converting standalone institutions into large multidisciplinary institutions will require additional resources in terms of funding, infrastructure, qualified faculty members from diverse streams, just to name a few. Going forward, as part of the NEP implementation phase, there is need to evolve a focused development plan with a defined timeline that specifically looks at policy implementation from a business school perspective. Herein, having dedicated governing body which looks at business schools' focus agenda becomes beneficial. AIMS, as part of its advocacy role, has constituted a special working group comprising of its past presidents and executive board members to closely look into the implications of NEP on management education overall and specifically on standalone business schools. While there are issues and challenges along the way, be it during this pandemic times or while implementing NEP, one aspect is to be grateful for, as it has given us a wonderful opportunity to rediscover and reinvent management education. Looking ahead, some of the emerging trends would be: first, rise of partnerships with global and domestic institutions. We will have more EdTech partners, partners for content, marketing, outsourcing of non-academic activities. This will also expand the student base from domestic to international. It will be about leveraging the strengths of every individual and stakeholder. Second, India become a hub for innovation and cutting-edge research with the thrust of multidisciplinary institutions and partnerships. Future is all about co-creation and co-production. Affordable excellence, balancing equity and excellence, and giving every learner the opportunity to learn irrespective of their background or economic status. Education needs to include the excluded. Third, learner-centric. It is all about personalized, modular, flexible, stackable credits and on-demand education. MOOCs, blended learning, academic bank of credit are all mentioned in the NEP. Fourth, in future, the metric for success of business schools will shift from placements, traditional ranking, to include how many startups have been produced, how many new jobs are created. Therefore, business schools need to constantly adapt their curriculum and align to the changing expectations of stakeholders and addressing real-life problems. We need to play the role of a need analyst and harness the power of research, innovation, and cutting across the disciplines. Topics related to sustainability, circular economy, ethics, intellectual property, AI, ML, analytics have already found their way into curriculum. Shifting from expenditure to investment, resources put into education by a student or by promoter or government needs to be looked at as an investment rather than expenditure. As the significance of investment before returns is much more than returns on investment, especially in education. We need to ramp up our investment in education, in our talent and our digital future. This would require agile leadership and developing leaders across levels. In this journey, business schools need to be mission driven. Herein, the role of management education in contributing to the mission of enhancing India GR to 50 and making India into a $5 trillion economy is an important cog in the wheel. So, the success mantra is taking charge of our future, embrace these constraints and co-create, as the possibilities are immense. It is my privilege to chair this plenary session, which has 4 eminent speakers coming with diverse expertise and vast experience. Our global marketing guru, management expert, my mentor, Professor Dr. Jagdish Sheth from Emory University. Our multifaceted personality bringing wealth of experience through his association with industry bodies and education, the chairman of Manipal Global Education, Shri Mohandas Paiji, director of India's leading business school, IIM Bangalore, who is strategy and innovation expert, Professor Dr. Rishikesh Krishna, and last but not the least, our management consultant, industry expert and good friend, who is a national lead of education and skill development from KPMG, Shri Narayan Ramaswamy ji. Our esteemed panel today will share their thoughts on the topic reorienting management education through pandemic and new education policy, and also look to answer questions such as what has disrupted us or what disruptions are likely to happen in the future, what skill sets will be required for new normal or the next normal, what would be the role of technology in defining our future, and what will be future of MBA PGDM. Let us now hear from our esteemed panel members.
Now, I would request Professor Jagdish Sheth, Professor, Emory University, Atlanta, to address this session.
Greetings. Thank you for inviting me to the 32nd AIMS convention. Time just flies. 2020 year will go down in the history of management education and in higher education in general as the most transformative year, and a decade for that matter, because of 2 events. One, of course, is the absolute lockdown of campuses because of the COVID-19 pandemic or epidemic, and the other one at the same time, the release of national education policy, which is a longer-term impact. COVID, of course, had the immediate impact, and there are several things we learned to do during the pandemic. First of all, we learned discovering a new way of teaching, new way of educating students. We went from physical to digital, and in the process we learned we can improvise quite a lot. And therefore the capacity constraints of the campus, number of students one can admit because of the residential hall requirements, may be liberalized in the process. I think all of a sudden we discovered that in addition to faculty, which is a key resource, IT is equally important. So it is now IT has become more a strategic function at the management institutes than strictly an administrative function, and hopefully reports directly to the directors of management institutes rather than to an administrative person. I think it's very important to learn how IT will become enabler to the faculty, enabler to the students, enabler to the campus as a major investment as we invest into the library, for example. IT also has speed up everything. Speeding up in terms of infrastructure investment, speeding up in terms of making sure that network connectivity happens, whether it's through Wi-Fi or some new technologies. Everything is on cloud computing. And you need to get a person or a leader for the IT function who is not just technical person, but also has the understanding of education as well as business aspects. Third, pandemic certainly allowed us to expand the market beyond our imagination. And the best example I can give you is IIM Bangalore, who was going online at the same time but accelerated due to the pandemic. And I'm told that IIM Bangalore, its online platform, already crossed 1 million students, all in management, but from all over the world and not just in India. With SWAYAM platform, which is a government platform, online education became more mainstream. We want to keep that in the back of our mind. One more thing that has happened, which we are now learning more and more, is that the half-life of knowledge is getting less and less across all disciplines, from astronomy on the one hand to paleontology, which is the discovery of civilizations and the start of the civilization or evolution of mankind, to even questioning physics, for example, and same thing true about the software. But it is very true in the management disciplines that our half-life of knowledge is getting less and less. And my estimate is that it's about 18 months or so, and therefore a 2-year PGDM program, whatever knowledge we learned, its usefulness is only half going forward. This immediately results into a consequence that we should not think about PGDM or an MBA as a terminal degree, but think about as one step in the lifelong learning, and how do we create a lifelong learning environment with students who join us. And more students will come, not fresh graduates, let's say from undergraduate to the MBA program or PGDM program, but these are all working professionals. With online education, it's very possible for them to work and at the same time get a college degree. So working professional has opened up a huge market out of nowhere, especially partnering with many platform learning platform companies such as Upgrad, for example, Simply Learn. These are pretty massive global online education platforms along with Pearson and others. And of course, the biggest of them so far is Coursera and edX. Think about all the possibilities if one partners with those online learning platforms. I clearly see now more and more the emergence of specialized MBAs. The traditional MBA was designed for general management, leadership skills, peer share, learning from each other's, team building and all that stuff. I think more and more companies are saying, I want an expert, I want a specialist. So most of the MS programs in the past now will be offered more in the MBA program, and MBA program itself going from 2 years to a 1-year cycle all over the world primarily. So how do you offer specialized 1-year MBAs? Not just marketing specialization or management specialization or finance specialization, but let's say specialization on within marketing on branding, or specialization within marketing on, in fact, distribution or e-commerce, social media, just goes on and on. People are looking for depth, not just the breadth of knowledge at the same time. And learning itself will change in terms of its pedagogy. Think about that one. In the days before Industrial Revolution and literacy came in, people learned. And they learned primarily from what I call 3 C's of learning. Learning from the community in which they grew up. In those days, people were born in a community and they died in the community. No mobility whatsoever. So they learned from the community norms, good behavior, bad behavior. They also learned from congregation. Even before the formal religions were offered, there was a congregation, some faith person would tell what is right or wrong, etc. And of course, they learned the 3rd C was craft. Some master guild person will teach you how to be a goldsmith, silversmith, or a ironsmith, whatever turns out to be the occupation for your livelihood. We shifted that to 3 R's of learning, reading, writing, and arithmetic. But I think in the going forward in the digital world, the traditional way we gather the knowledge and disseminate the knowledge is not the future. So I have a new phrase called the 3 I's of learning. Learning will be more interactive. Learning will be more integrated between, let's say, math and music for the school system, or between finance and marketing in the management schools. What is common between the two? Math and music both are languages. So is software. Can we think at a more meta level in the process? I think that's very important. And the third element of learning is that learning will become more individualized, more personalized. The pace will be up to what the student can do as opposed to locked into hours and the times and everything the way we teach it now. This is the future of management education or higher education in general because of the COVID and the technology that we were forced to embrace essentially on a universal basis. The second major impact, of course, is the national education policy. There are three aspects of national education policy that are very important. First of all, it basically is a student-centric approach. Let students decide the career path rather than lock into engineering or management, liberal arts, MBA, whatever turns out to be. And they can bank the credit hours from one institution to the other, giving them more mobility. Second major element of the national education policy is that it frees up all the silos by location, by time, so there's excess capacity surprisingly will be created on the campus in the process. And the third element is that it requires management institutes to become more universities or interdisciplinary. So what are its consequences? I think to survive against competition which NEP encourages foreign universities to come to India, I think that one of the first things we'll have to do is to have a global mindset. And that means how can we have and how can we embrace global standards, especially accreditation standards, ASCSB for the North American standard, EQUIS for the European standard, and there may be a third standard someplace besides the Indian standards. We must learn to attract students, especially from other emerging economies, where we have a very good soft power. People believe India is a well-educated people, well-talented people all over the world. We do have, in fact, Indian leadership in corporations, Indian leadership in universities, in England, in America, in Canada. I think one can leverage all that. So attract students from Africa and ASEAN countries or anywhere there are emerging economies. Create education cities. Already you have cities like Manipal on the one hand or Noida on the other hand becoming education cities. Can we expand that so that all campuses are in one location and it is basically a campus town with multiple universities? I think it's going to happen as a clustering phenomenon because it has all of the advantages of infrastructure, the roads, the flights, the trains, whatever they are, and of course, students can meet with each other from different universities. As many American universities you will see are basically clusters of university higher education. Become a management university, similar to what Singapore Management University has done. In addition to business school, there are 4 or 5 other schools like a law school, for example, information sciences, economics. One can broaden out that way. One can have to think about what happened in the old days. Carnegie Mellon was a technical institute. It became a university. So is Caltech. It was a polytechnic, became a university. So is Georgia Tech, for example, in Atlanta where I live, would be true of University of Illinois at one time. But Georgia Tech, Brooklyn Polytechnic, I can give you many polytechnics who evolve over time as universities by adding additional branches of engineering and then non-engineering classes or courses or degrees primarily. I have one more suggestion, namely share the campus with foreign universities. One of the things we are very much blessed is that we have large campuses other than a few metro areas. 100 acres, 200 acres is not uncommon, and therefore we can locate part of the campus for a foreign university to put their marquee there. Actually, in fact, they can rent it from you, offer their degrees, their faculty, and there might be some co-creation of value that can be done. And the last one, very important message is that if the foreign universities come to America or India, then we have to go to where they are. Typical competitive reaction. So one has to think about expanding Indian management institutes globally, both in terms of a physical presence as well as an online presence. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation. I do want to mention that India is very likely to become the education capital of the world, as it has become the IT services capital or accounting capital, most of the professional services, because we have the talent and we have the technology. Thank you very much.
Now I would request Padma Shri Mohandas Pai sir to address the audience.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this seminar to talk to you. Good afternoon, and I'm very happy to be here. As I speak to you today, the world is undergoing a very seminal change, the like of which we have not seen for possibly a century. The pandemic led to a lockdown across the world, and what we are seeing is the rise of the digital revolution. Suddenly, the digital world is upon us. 20 years ago, the internet came into being, and the internet changed the way business is done and the way business will be done in future. The world before the internet was the world which was the creation of the Industrial Revolution. In the Industrial Revolution, Europe dominated the world because of the rise of the machine. The Industrial Revolution came to Great Britain first and spread to Europe. And Europe had their colonies and they dominated the world. And the business model was built upon that. And the global business model was built upon creating a global supply chain where there were producers who supplied to the entire world, who got raw materials from various countries, colonies in the beginning, and later independent countries. And then they created a supply chain to shipping, to transportation, to pipelines, to retail, wholesale, warehouses, financial service, etc. And those who control the supply chain control the business, because that's the way to connect to the customers. Now, in the digital world, with the rise of the internet, all this has changed. To give you some data, there's 7.8 billion people on the planet. 5.5 billion have a mobile connection, and about 5 billion people are on the internet. 4.5 billion people are on social media. And when the lockdown happened around the world, and most countries went to the lockdown, everybody connected who had the digital media through digital connection. So we got our goods and services through e-commerce, we got education through e-education, health through talking to doctors on video, we got financial services through the mobile, and we also got entertainment through the mobile, through OTT and everything else. And suddenly business changed. And the great majority of people in the developed countries and in business went home and started work from home. So you're no longer in the same place, but you are working from home and connecting throughout the world. And suddenly the idea of business being a local business where you went to a place where you work together with others and then you connected with the entire world was turned upside down. This is the world where everybody connected to the digital media and everybody spoke to each other. It was 24/7, and that is the new normal. And when the world comes back to normal, hopefully it will come back to normal. We don't know when. We're going to have hybrid working where people are going to work from home. People are going to work in a particular office, as an office close to the place, etc. And most global companies and more businesses are adjusted to the new world. And they have said very clearly that this is the way we got to be. And we don't know what is going to happen in future. We have to wait and see, because there's going to be much innovation. And also, there's a huge upsurge of spending on the digital media. In 2019, $2 trillion was spent on digital transformation. Possibly now it could go to $2.5 trillion globally. And this huge spending, which is the largest capex ever in human history, is going to transform business models. And we have to be ready to meet those business models when we educate young students in business schools in India and all around the world. And that is the big message that we have to carry with us. Suddenly, the digital media has become more valuable. If you look at the top 10 companies in the world, 8 of the top 10 are digital companies. The only other companies that are there were Saudi Aramco and possibly Berkshire Hathaway. The rest are all digital companies like Apple, who had $2.5 trillion of market value. Can you imagine $2.5 trillion? Maybe 2 years back, we never knew it could be $2.5 trillion, but that's the value the market is ascribing to it, and that's going to be there. So what are the big issues that are going to rise? One, new business models of connecting directly to consumers through the internet has come. That means we're all on a single global platform where we connect to consumers and businesses run on that, and we can sell goods and services to anybody using supply chain at the back end. So you're not constrained by the supply chain to develop a global business, either for a product or for a service. And that is going to remain forever. New kinds of innovation like artificial intelligence, machine learning is coming. which is going to displace humans. Today, we are in the age of robotics, the age of machines of a different kind, not the kind of machines that came through the Industrial Revolution. And this means 50 to 60% of human activity is going to possibly be done by machines to AI algorithms and machine learning and to software. And software is going to eat hardware. That's the old cliche could come true. The third important thing is that innovation cycles are going to become shorter. And if innovation cycles become shorter, change is going to be much more rapid. Innovation cycles today are maybe 18 months, and change is going to be much more rapid. And that means that we have to be prepared for change, and any business model that is there is going to be different. That means we have to construct new models of business. How do you make sure that, business as part of strategy, we create a business where the core value of the business remains with us, the brand, the product design, etc., and distribution and connections is done through intermediaries or through other places or through the web. And so we have to rethink our entire business model, reimagine the entire world, and that's going to be different. And we got to be flexible for change. And the next point is the huge amount of capital in the world. Interest rates have crashed. $25 trillion of money has been printed by the central banks. That's the assets value they're holding on the balance sheet. About $40 trillion or $45 trillion of government bonds, half of them are negative interest rates, and that's not going to go away because you can't reduce the assets in the balance sheet, because if you do, they're going to be in trouble. And that means this kind of disruptive capital is going around the world, seeking value, destroying models. They're giving huge value to upstarts and to the digital innovators and taking away value from other companies which are possibly slow to change. So we're going to see a very new world. We're going to see things very differently. And that's happening right before our eyes. And it is global. And nobody can stop that, because you could put physical barriers throughout the world, through shipping or through ports and everything else. But when much of the goods become digital goods, like music has become a digital good, health has become a digital good, etc., you still need the physical medium, supply chain, but many things have become digital and the value is going to go there and you can't shut it out. China created the great firewall, but all countries cannot create the firewall and is there. And this has led to the rise of global monopolies like Apple and Google, which are creating their own verticals where they have their own operating system. For example, Google has maybe 2 billion people on Android, and Apple has another 2 billion people on iOS, and everything is coming through the iOS system. And these top global digital companies have revenues of close to $1 trillion and their profits of $250 billion a year, enormous amount of money. So you understand the role of disruptive capital. Now, in the midst of all this, we have to run business schools, we have to educate people for the new world. And on top of that, we have the new education policy coming in India. And being student-centric, it means clearly the students can opt in and out, they can take credits in our colleges, go somewhere else and do something else. So the whole education system is being turned upside down. And at the back end, we have the global disruption into technology and the disruption in business models in India. So I think we have a perfect storm which we have to rise. But what are the principles which will allow us to do well in this area? Now, government is very clear in its mind that they're going to give you freedom, you have to compete, and education has to be student-centric. No longer education is going to be one which is going to be regulated, where you're told what to do and you have to do your courses, and students come and they learn, they go outside and they get jobs. Because employers today are demanding that they want different kind of students. What kind of MBA graduates? One, the graduates should have a curious mind. They must have problem-solving skills. They must have good communication ability. They must have the knowledge of change. They should be able to have manage change. They should be change agents. And managing change is extremely important. They should be strategic in the thought to understand global business strategy and see how to create new business model. So you require a new kind of person who's going to be a leader. And that's why our MBA schools have to be leaders. So institutions should look at the new model and create a curriculum which is based on live experience and create them and instill in the student the principles that will make them succeed. The business theory can be at the back end. In colleges, there's no need to teach them business theory, management theory, because that they can pick up very easily. But you must teach them how to solve problems, changes, and come out with solutions and use data to craft solutions. So the case method and the new method, not old cases 20 years back, what happened, because they're not relevant. What is happening right now, what companies are doing. So pick up the top 200 innovators in the world and the local markets, and you ask your students to come out with solutions and what challenges they're going to face and reimagine the way that they're going to do things. Then NAP speaks about lifelong learning, etc. And that gives an opportunity, because at a time when change is going to be extremely rapid, we have to be very clear that we are going to create a framework for lifelong education where MBA graduates can keep coming back to our institutions to learn. So online education, digital education, short courses, strategic thinking, more case studies, more content becomes extremely, extremely important. And there, competition is going to be severe. Many edtech companies are coming. They're getting huge valuation. Are they going to destroy the traditional business school? I think yes. Half of the traditional business school may not exist, because today, why do I need an MBA degree? I need an MBA degree because the certificate of assurance which employers want. And it says that, you have done a course and you got certain marks. Now, what do employers look? Employers are looking for different skills. And students are saying, why should I spend so much of money going through an MBA? So we got to answer that question. So we got to reorient what we do. And we got to compete with the edtech companies which are coming with courses. Today, many of the edtech companies are coming with courses where to take credits from the big institutions in the world, and they give you a certificate, and you can go to an employer, and the employer will say, fine, I'm happy with that. I don't need it from XYB schools. So we got to cater to that. And then we have this idea of standalone management institutions in the country. What should we do? I think the important thing to do is to create networks, be part of a global network. Get an agreement with 100, 200 management institutes where students can go to and fro and create courses and get credits for the courses, and make sure that you specialize in something which is very unique, because specialization is the key to the future, not generalization. So specialize in something that gives you an unfair advantage. And I think that's extremely important, but create a network. So you can all be part of the network. And through the network, you can have online education, you can have physical education, you can do many things, and you can get the content created by hundreds of professors all over the place. And the class sizes could be bigger. If in your network, you have a professor who is very, very well versed in new management theory, maybe what you should do is allow them to teach larger classes. So make the course flexible and give them a lot of credits, and I'm sure you'll do well. And be more consultative. Today, the scope for management consulting is going to expand tremendously. The scope for training people in corporations is going to expand tremendously. So be outgoing and manage all that very well. Now, what should be the business institute interface? I think business and institutions should be closer together, and that network you have to build. You must answer the question, why should business interact with you? And you must answer the question. And if you're able to answer the question, you'll succeed. Because many complain business doesn't interact with us. And I tell them, why should business interact with you? What do you have to offer that is so very special? So you've got to think it through and make sure that businesses want to come to you. Your professors and faculty should work in business, should talk to them, involve business leaders into your business school, and make sure the interaction goes through very well. Because once you do that, then you are very live and you're solving problems that are important for industry, important for business at this point of time. So I want to end here by saying that the world has changed. The digital revolution is there. New business models have come. Change is going to be extremely rapid. There's going to be disruptive capital. There's a new education policy, and we have to change our business schools, reach out to the community, reach out to business, create a product with a business school graduate who is a problem solver and who can articulate new strategies, who understands what is around the globe, not teach only management theory, but the application. And if you do well, I'm sure all of us will succeed. Thank you very much. I'm very grateful for this opportunity and wish you all the best for this seminar.
I would request Professor Rishikesh Krishna to address the audience now.
Thank you for inviting me to the Association of Indian Management Schools convention. And I'm happy to be speaking about reorienting management education in the times of the pandemic and the new education policy. I was just thinking back to a time a couple of years ago when I was teaching the core strategy course at IIM Bangalore. We talked about the airline industry, all about industry analysis and competitive positioning. We did another case on Accor's digital strategy to cope with the threat of disruptors like Airbnb. And we talked about Uber and the strategic management of network businesses. These were just three of the important cases we discussed during the course. Little did we think at that time that maybe just a year later, in fact, not even a year later, just 6 months later, all these companies in these industries would be in dire straits. And we simply didn't anticipate this at all. In fact, in the discussion in the class, the possibility of something like a lockdown never even crossed our mind. And just think a little bit before that. Of course, we have seen black swan events in our lifetime, like the terrorist events in the US around 9/11. And we have also seen other major disruptive events like the financial markets collapse in 2007, 2008, which were foreseen by a small minority of experts and analysts, but really not expected by the mainstream. So the fact is that there are some of these events which some of us do manage to get a sense of, but the majority seem to miss out on them. And this pandemic was perhaps just another event like that. So what does this mean for management education? I think what it means for management education is that we undoubtedly live in a turbulent world, and therefore management graduates need to be prepared to manage their organizations in this turbulent world. So how do we prepare leaders for this? What are the qualities and skills that our future business leaders must have to better handle the risks and grasp the opportunities of an increasingly turbulent world? This is the first part of what I would like to share on rethinking management education. What do we need to prepare our managers for? I think the first important thing is we need to avoid decision-making biases. As you all know, human beings tend to pay more credence to data that support their own hypothesis or model, and we tend to reject data that counter the model we have in our head. We also tend to give more weight to recent events. So, confirmation bias, recency bias, these are all some of the biases which have been well studied and are understood to exist with many of us. And remember, these biases can lead to big mistakes in a turbulent world. So the first thing all of us need to do is to train our young managers to be aware of these possible biases that could cloud their decision making and provide them the tools that will overcome or prevent or at least reduce the impact of these decision making biases. We also know that no one can quite tell the future. None of us have clairvoyance. We can't imagine what's going to happen tomorrow. But we can build alternate scenarios, not to predict what will happen, but to go through the process of thinking through alternate futures so that we are prepared to respond. You might remember that in the old oil shocks of several years ago, in the 70s and 80s, companies like Shell demonstrated the utility of scenario planning. And this is the second skill we need to prepare our students with. The first one is to avoid or to reduce decision-making biases. The second one is to practice scenario planning. What we also need to do is to become better at identifying and assessing risks. In this context, I remember a very interesting comment or a very interesting trend that C.K. Prahalad used to underline very often. And that is the ability to pick up weak signals. Often, much before an event has happened, there are some preliminary signs that maybe something is not quite right. And we need to actively surface those weak signals. We need to tap into local intelligence, leverage extended networks, mobilize search parties, even if virtual search parties, so that we can try to identify some of these weak signals early. Continuous interaction with a wide range of stakeholders, including nonprofits, is helpful so that issues get flagged very early. So this is the third important characteristic we need to develop: better identification and assessment of risks. The fourth thing we need to look at clearly is business continuity and contingency plans. We have clearly seen during the pandemic that those companies which were able to quickly shift to digital and which were able to make changes in their supply chains were much better suited or much better able to cope with the pandemic. In fact, if you remember the first few weeks of the pandemic in India, it was the local mom and pop or kirana stores which were our lifeline. And in fact, the large e-commerce players took a little while to get used to the pandemic. And it's the smaller stores which were actually able to, basically deal with the pandemic in a much better way, at least to start with, though I guess over time the e-commerce players came back with a bang. What we also need to realize, and this is something that again comes through from the pandemic, that we need to have a strong entrepreneurial mindset. Too much focus on risks can make you miss opportunities, but at the same time, you need to be an intelligent risk taker. And what you need to do is continuously test the assumptions on which your decisions are based and pivot when the earlier assumptions no longer hold. Of course, this is very much part of the whole lean thinking movement, but I think the pandemic has underlined this. So how can we inculcate this entrepreneurial mindset as well as lean thinking in our students, in our management education participants? This is another big question we need to address. What goes without saying is that understanding and appreciating technology is key to managing in the current times. Many of the new opportunities are centered on data and digital. In fact, we know that data and digital companies have seen their opportunities as well as their market valuation increase manyfold during the pandemic. Older companies like GE are trying to recast themselves in this space. And even the older tech companies are embracing newer technologies and approaches. For example, both Microsoft and IBM are embracing the cloud. So clearly understanding and appreciating technology is another skill we need to emphasize in our management programs. And I'll come back to this in a little while. Just to give you an example of a company that has embraced digital extremely well and has completely recast its business is Bajaj Finance. Bajaj Finance, the retail lending arm of Bajaj Finserv, has issued over the years millions of what they call EMI cards to potential customers or to actual customers as well. They study and monitor the repayment behavior of these customers. This gives them data on creditworthiness. They also integrate this data with third-party data they get from credit bureaus like Equifax. And with all of this together, they're able to take very good credit decisions in a very short time. In fact, just in a matter of minutes, using a mobile app, they can take a decision and their NPAs are not too bad. I mean, if you look at it, their recoveries are actually pretty good, which suggests that this data-driven approach is actually working well. Another characteristic we need to really emphasize in management education going forward, which has once again got underlined by the pandemic, is collaboration. Collaboration has just become much more important. The largest companies are reaching out to startups for the latest tech and to be more nimble. Startups are reaching out to large companies for regulatory support and market reach. Large companies are collaborating with other large companies to do strategic experimentation, like we see in the automotive sector, where Ford is collaborating with a whole set of companies to explore the changing contours of mobility. So what is very clear is that business leaders need to be able to forge and sustain relationships. And this is another very important characteristic we need to make sure our management graduates are equipped with. In fact, open innovation, smart collaboration, these are some of the mantras. Just to take a simple example, look at the success story of the most successful company in the whole testing space for the COVID virus. If you look at the COVID virus, the earliest testing kit came from a small startup in Pune called My Lab Discovery Solutions. And My Lab partnered with the Serum Institute and with Syngene and with several other large companies to quickly scale up and reach the market. So it's just obvious now that being able to collaborate is critical for competitive success. Now, some of these insights were further reinforced when I recently spoke to a whole range of business leaders in the context of our ongoing MBA review process at IIM Bangalore. What these industry leaders told me reinforces and also adds to some of the points I just made. And I'd like to summarize and quickly tell you a little bit of what they shared with us. The first important thing is about digital. One comment an industry leader made is that today every project is a tech project. And in fact, consulting firms are not hiring just management graduates, but they're increasingly hiring people with tech skills. Management graduates need to have digital fluency. What is digital fluency? You need to know the basics of AI, IoT, quantum tech, etc. Not the coding part, but just basic understanding of what they are and what they do. You need to develop computational thinking because more and more the human-machine interface is becoming important. You need to know how and where to use these different technologies. And most importantly, from a societal perspective, you need to be familiar with their legal and ethical use. Some other important aspects are business model and platform thinking, which are transforming the business models of the future. So these are all very important components that we need to have in our MBA. If you look at the market side, consumers are today leading marketing and daily price discovery. Old models are becoming less relevant. One industry leader gave me an example. He said earlier marketers used to talk about awareness leading to interest, leading to desire, and then to action. Now communication and buying are getting integrated. In fact, the whole process of making a sale is just totally integrated with the communication process. Distribution is also changing. Seamless omni-channel across all functions seems to be the way of the future. And quoting Amazon and Google is not so relevant anymore. The question is, how will you in your company pivot digitally? And for all of us as managers, or for all our graduates as managers, effective use of social media, both personal and official, seems to be an integral part of the repertoire they need. Let me now come to data in the MBA. Earlier, we had a simple phenomenon. There was often lack of data and intuitive decisions had to be made. So who was best placed to make those decisions? Obviously, the people with the most experience. So decisions used to be pushed up to those with more experience. Now, data is available or generated through experiments. And clearly, your willingness to do experiments is really important to therefore getting the important insights from data. As far as the role of MBAs regarding data is concerned, there are two views. One view is that MBAs need to know basic languages and tools. They need to be able to deal with both structured and unstructured data. They need to be able to handle large data sets. They need to know the visualization tools, a little bit more towards the data science and analytics side. But others argue that that's not really where the MBA brings value. The MBA brings value more through the insights he or she can generate, because the product is no longer the differentiator. The value is in the inciting, which is a combination of data, psychology, consumer behavior, and behavioral economics. The next important phenomenon we need to keep in mind is ESG, environmental, social, and governance concerns. These are now center stage. They are no longer nice to have. In fact, one industry leader told me that in the Netherlands, the Paris Accord emission targets are now at the firm level. They're not just at the country level. The brand increasingly needs to have a soul, needs to have purpose. This is another thing which many industry leaders underline. And ESG clearly poses real business dilemmas. It involves giving up some current benefits for future collective benefits. So the ability once again to collaborate, bring companies together is crucial. And to be effective in this ESG domain, you need to align individual goals with company goals. Ethics and integrity is becoming more and more critical by the day. A very interesting comment which an industry leader made to me. Choksi and Mallya could have been as rich and well regarded as Premji if only they had understood ethics and integrity well. At the same time, a lot of the traditional things we emphasized in management education continue to be important. You need to be able to bridge the theory-practice gap. You need to be able to communicate well, which, in spite of all the changes and developments that have happened, is still a challenge for many of our management graduates. Particularly written communication is important. Many of our young friends are articulate, but they can't write a brief and precise note. And you need to have the courage to speak up and say what you need to say and when you need to say it. That's another important characteristic we need to develop in our young managers. One thing which many of our leaders noticed is that addressing open-ended problems and challenges is not one of the strengths of many of our young managers. So as the World Economic Forum suggested, we need to develop creativity, critical thinking, complex problem-solving skills so that our youngsters can address these open-ended problems. Commercial acumen, a very traditional notion which many of our business communities have, which levers to push to achieve financial results, continues to be important. And so does personal well-being. I mean, we've seen so many people face health challenges because of comorbidities and mental health challenges during the pandemic, which is again underlining the importance of personal health and well-being. And finally, emerging as critical is how the government works, understanding the law, managing crisis. All of these are becoming extremely important things, which perhaps were important before, but they've got really more underlined during the pandemic. So just to kind of close and sum up, I think management education has many things to learn from the pandemic. The new education policy also emphasizes the importance of multidisciplinary learning. You can see that many of the things I spoke about in the last few minutes do involve drawing from different disciplines. So what I tried to lay out for you were some of the important themes that need to go into management education for us to take management education way forward after the pandemic and in keeping with the new education policy. Thank you.
Finally, I would request Mr. Narayan Ramaswamy sir to address the audience.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to be amidst you in the 32nd Convention of AIMS. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to be a part of this August panel. And I would also like to congratulate them for choosing the topic. Nothing could be more relevant than reorienting management education or business schools today for a variety of reasons. So let me start by saying, why should we even look at reorienting or changing business school formats? What is the need for it? To do that, let's track back a little. When I did my little research in terms of how did management education in its current form originate, I could trace it as long back as 1872, when the M. Lyon Business School was formed in France as a part of the Lyon Chamber of Commerce and Industry. That's how it started. And then in 1881, Joseph Wharton started the Wharton School of Business as a part of University of Pennsylvania. In 1898, the Booth School of Business happened in University of Chicago. 1900, the Tuck School happened as a part of Dartmouth College. And in 1908, the Harvard Business School happened. These institutions kind of define how management education is happening today. So what is relevant? Look back at the time when they formed how management education should happen. It was the time when Industrial Revolution was at its peak, and the idea was to have management talent who could run these businesses, who could maximize returns from this, who could reach out to masses with the produce that they had. And that over a period of time has been changing. Along with that, there has been some little changes that has been happening in B schools and management education as well. The IT revolution happened, which kind of changed the way people got employed. Many industries changed, and computers, as they say famously, was trying to replace people. And there were a whole lot of new roles that came up, new format of companies that came up, new businesses happened, and still the format of B schools remained pretty much the same. And so it was more about strategic planning, about long-term perspectives, about operational planning, setting standards for processes and later systems, building a corporate culture, bringing in teaming, leadership, and some of these areas. It's not as if these are not relevant. These are fundamentals, and these are relevant even today. But is this the kind of B school education that we want? What is it that has changed in the business scenario and in the ecosystem in general? And why do we believe that we need a change or we need a reorientation of business education? And to do this, while I was doing this, there were a few questions that were put in front of me. While the kind of skills that will be needed in future have been identified or in the process of being discovered, what kind of changes should happen in curriculum, in pedagogy, and how should we incorporate this? The second question now, what is the significance of upskilling and reskilling in the new world? And the third one is all to do with COVID-19 pandemic, and what does it call for as a change? Let me try and answer these questions. And let me try and do this with an example. In one of the trades, this is to do with alternate energy and solar panels and other things, there was one particular job role where you need to lay these solar panels, maintain them, which needed a particular skill, both physically, somebody who was robust, usually males, and also something to do with an electrical, mechanical engineering knowledge. And this happened for some time. The job role was set and somebody was managing these things along these lines. Then came in digital revolutions very recently, and there were much more efficient way of doing things using robots. So robots started replacing, this particular job of, laying and managing solar panels. And suddenly the people who need to manage this were different. They were the ones who were managing these robots, who were giving instructions to these robots, who were programming to make sure that they work efficiently. So, and the job profile also changed. We needed somebody who had patience, who were able to look at causal programming and things like that. And there were a lot of women who suddenly came into picture who were not even part of the consideration set earlier. In the wake of it, what is the kind of skills that we are looking at? We are looking at somebody who can trace a pattern. We are looking at somebody who can connect the dots and kind of almost crystal ball gaze into how things can emerge as a manager and as a leader. You need analytical skills, reasoning skills to find out how things can happen, much more than what is required today. And we also need skills where it's not about managing one corporate culture, but there are fragments of the organization that can work with different culture, and you need to manage that diversity. Sometimes it is even divergent cultures, but you need to manage them. So you can't insist on, say, one corporate culture, so to say. And then earlier it was managing, people, and then there were machines who did work and people who managed those machines. The machines were dumb and the people were managing it. But increasingly we are looking at machines that are going to manage themselves. There is artificial intelligence, there is Internet of Things, and we need people and job roles that are going to be effective in managing this environment. Both people and machines, and sometimes even predominantly machines. So the management style and the leadership are going to be very different, and which essentially means that unless you are continuously learning how to do it, you are no more relevant. Gone are the days where we say that when I'm 25 or 30, I have done with my education, and then I move into this world of business or creating a future for yourself, as if learning has stopped. That can't happen anymore, because the rate at which the job roles are changing, the rate at which newer demands are put on people, particularly the managers, is only increasing. In that sense, unless you are continuously skilling yourself, I would even say, rather than calling it upskilling and reskilling, we should call it continuous skilling. So it doesn't even wait for a particular period for you to go back and reskill yourself. It happens almost on a continuous basis. So I would think the management education should reflect this in terms of having multiple nuggets of continuous learning, rather than package it in 9 months or 18 months and say you've learned everything that you want for your life. It also means that in alignment with what national education policy or the new education policy also states, that you should be able to have multiple entries and exits. Management education, B schools used to have a fixed period in which you do your education and then you're out. You're struck out of the roles. But maybe we are looking at perpetual enrollment, where the B schools need to continuously handhold these leaders till they are working, till they are in business. So we are looking at a different things. We are looking at a different curriculum. We are looking at content that is being different. We are looking at the method of teaching being different. Clearly here, with the digital formats being available, we should look at our B schools having a combination of self-learning through digital means plus classroom teaching that is going to augment what they have learned, rather than start the teaching in the classrooms, which is how it is happening today. So there is changes in that. And look at assessments. Earlier, assessments used to be in a certain format. Now assessments are getting more and more real life. Assessments may not happen inside the college or inside the school anymore. Assessment could be a part of how you are evaluated on the business. So across the value chain, curriculum, content, pedagogy, teaching, learning, and even certifications. We may not have one certificate which is called a postgraduate diploma or an MBA. Instead, you could have multiple credits that you gather, and each one could be different in terms of how much you have gathered and the quality of the credits that you have gathered. That will define what is it that you are being assessed and what is it that you are qualified to do. So in short, I think there is a big change that is happening. Management education is at crossroads. The nice format that the American model that was set in terms of how business schools need to be run is undergoing a change. We need to be cognizant of that and start working towards making management education relevant, contemporary, and make sure that in India we give management education to our future leaders who are going to be present not just in India but in different parts of the world. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
It's indeed been an excellent and insightful session on the topic. I thank all the speakers of this panel to have taken time out from their busy schedule to share their views. I also take this opportunity to thank all the past presidents of AIMS, deans, directors, faculty, and students of the member institute, all the invitees, delegates, and participants. Special thanks to Bhavan Center for Communication and Management, VCCM Bhubaneswar, for organizing and hosting this convention. I also take this opportunity to thank our sponsoring patron, MGM Minerals Odisha. Thanks once more.